Hello, I'm Michael Graves. This is the silent killer, carbon monoxide. I'm a Minneapolis firefighter and will be presenting a risk reduction lecture to you, the Concerned Parents Group. This is an implementation of the department's non-traditional services for community risk reduction. This program will provide for increased safety, injury prevention, and convenient public services for our community. The department understands we are the public safety experts, and it is our duty to inform and ensure our community has the information, skills, and capacity to live safe lives, reducing the manageable risks. The department's community risk reduction services will be including all the risks in our community. These risks consist of bicycle safety, honeybees, carbon monoxide, dog bites, terrorism awareness, and ingested poisonings, to name a few. I have chosen to discuss the risk topic of carbon monoxide. I will bring you helpful information on reducing the risk of carbon monoxide at home and everywhere else. After this presentation, you should be able to define what carbon monoxide is. It is often confused with carbon dioxide. You will have an understanding of what carbon monoxide poisoning is. When discussing CO poisoning, who is at risk? What ideas do you have in your head now? Let's see if they differ after this presentation. Think of some things which may produce carbon monoxide. I will discuss common sources in our everyday lives. The signs and symptoms of CO poisoning may not be noticeable right now, but you will be able to know how to recognize them after this presentation. Finally, I will give ways to prevent, prepare, and respond to CO emergency and/or exposures. What is carbon monoxide? It is a gas composed of one carbon molecule and one oxygen molecule. Carbon monoxide is known as the silent killer. It is less dense than air. This does not mean it rises above ambient air, however. Its density is so close to air, it evenly distributes in ambient air. Carbon monoxide is a poisonous gas in certain doses. It is a colorless, odorless, tasteless gas, which makes it impossible to detect without the proper equipment. Detectors are the first line of defense in homes. When unsure, call 911. The fire department will investigate for you with the 4-gas monitor. And if carbon monoxide is detected, the gas company will determine the solution. This will be discussed further later. Carbon monoxide is produced when fuel is burned. Fuels like carbon, example being wood, or gas. Many confuse carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. They are two different gases with dissimilar attributes. Although both are gases containing carbon and oxygen, carbon monoxide is one molecule of each, and carbon dioxide consists of one molecule of carbon and 2 molecules of oxygen. Carbon monoxide is a toxic, deadly gas. It is formed during chemical reactions, mainly during thermal or incomplete decomposition. Carbon dioxide is non-toxic. We are exhaling it now. Remember science class as a kid? Dry ice is the solid form of carbon dioxide. The effects of carbon monoxide vary. It depends on the concentration and the amount of exposure. We must remember carbon monoxide is in the air we are currently breathing. This is not harming us at all. Death is imminent at certain concentrations and lengths of exposure. As we can see in this picture, the low levels are manageable by healthy individuals. Those with previous conditions are affected differently. Conditions like chronic heart disease, anemia, or respiratory problems. We will discuss symptoms later, but we can see how the more concentrated, the quicker the effects happen. At 12,800 parts per million, one loses consciousness in 1 to 3 minutes and has a high risk of death. 50 parts per million is permissible for an 8-hour period. At a length of 2 to 3 hours at 200 parts per million, one will likely incur a headache. At 1600 parts per million, a headache occurs at 20 minutes, along with dizziness and nausea. At 1 hour exposure of 1600 parts per million, there is a chance of death. To reiterate, the effects worsen the longer the exposure and higher the concentration. Carbon monoxide poisoning occurs by inhaling carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide poisoning is a greater risk the higher the concentration of CO in the environment. CO poisoning is mostly accidental and causes many accidental deaths across the nation. We inhale the carbon monoxide in the atmosphere, it enters our lungs, and like the oxygenation of our blood in the lungs, carbon monoxide attaches to the red blood cells, or hemoglobin. The carbon monoxide attached to the red blood cells prevents oxygen from attaching to the cells. The more and more carbon monoxide in the blood, the less oxygen. This is what causes the symptoms of CO poisoning. A negative effect with carbon monoxide is it does not read on a pulse oximeter, which gives the oxygen saturation in your blood. This makes it difficult to detect by first responders if you have minor effects of CO poisoning. There are many limits to carbon monoxide. OSHA and others have standard limits for daily and yearly carbon monoxide exposures. The National Comfort Institute Corporation mimics OSHA standard. The National Comfort Institute explains we have levels of 1 to 2 parts per million in our tissues presently. The appliances in our home off gas at 9 parts per million. That is also the recommended limit for any new appliance to off gas. Walking through a parking garage, we may experience levels of 25 parts per million, but this is usually for a short period of time. Once we re-enter the normal atmospheric level, we reduce the carbon monoxide risks. OSHA recommends that an 8-hour shift, one does not exceed 50 parts per million for the duration, meaning 49 parts per million for the 8-hour shift is acceptable. The picture here shows the alarm levels of a household carbon monoxide detector. We see a minimum time to alarm and a maximum time to alarm. At 30 parts per million, your alarm may sound after 30 days or may never alarm. This is often why an alarm may sound with no signs or symptoms from residents. At 400 parts per million, an alarm will sound in no less than 4 minutes and no more than 15. If we recall from a couple of slides ago, at 400 parts per million, we would receive a frontal headache after 1 to 2 hours. So there's no need to panic at being alarmed at 15 minutes. One may have some small signs and symptoms at this point. I asked you to think of who you believe is at risk for carbon monoxide related incidents. If you thought everyone, you are correct. We are all at the mercy of carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide poisoning can occur anywhere there is improper ventilation or improper combustion. Carbon monoxide is mostly an accidental killer, although it is also a form of suicide. People often run their cars in garages to build the carbon monoxide up and eventually suffocate. However, there are new safety features and better burning vehicles made today. The levels of carbon monoxide do not reach high enough to kill someone in a newer vehicle. At greater risk than a healthy individual are unborn babies, infants, elderly, and people with prior health conditions. I mentioned these previously, but to reiterate, they are conditions like chronic heart disease, anemia, or respiratory problems. According to the Center for Disease Control, or CDC, there are more than 20,000 carbon monoxide poisonings related visits to the emergency room a year, with 400 deaths from unintentional carbon monoxide poisoning not associated with fires. What do you see when thinking of producers of carbon monoxide poisoning? It is more than just ovens and furnaces. Carbon monoxide poisoning during a house fire is a cause of fire fatalities. Carbon monoxide is a byproduct of burning fuels. Fuels such as wood, oil, natural gas, kerosene, propane, coal, and diesel. An electrical appliance cannot produce carbon monoxide. While stoves and furnaces are likely sources in homes, water heaters, generators, running vehicles and garages, clogged chimneys, cooking with charcoal, or propane grills indoors are also sources in homes. We We'll discuss later preventing these risks with routine checks. As we saw earlier, there are many regulations on the allowable amount of carbon monoxide a household appliance can produce. It is possible to get a reading of 9 parts per million when using a gas oven for an extended period of time. It is recommended to have a detector in every room of your house, especially near appliances which will be likely sources of carbon monoxide. Do not confuse carbon monoxide poisoning with a good night out. You are not hungover. The signs and symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning are often confused with the flu. It is not advised to believe you are just experiencing the flu and not leave the house if you had no prior contact with the flu. In any case, because carbon monoxide poisoning is high in the winter months, flu season, due to the furnace being used, especially at the beginning, exit the environment if these symptoms appear. If the symptoms are relieved, call 911. There is a problem with carbon monoxide in your home. Another way to determine if there is a problem with carbon monoxide is if multiple members of the household are experiencing the symptoms congruently, whether during flu season or outside of it. We will discuss in the next slide CO detectors. It is possible it may not be working or defective. As you can see, symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning include headache, fatigue, shortness of breath, nausea, dizziness, and confusion. It is common for people to want to lie down and sleep when experiencing carbon monoxide poisoning. Like the incident in North Carolina in 2013, where a mother and her 11-year-old child were victims of carbon monoxide. The mother, who was feeling nauseated, rushed to the bathroom. She then became tired and lay on the bathroom floor. She knew she needed to get up, but could not. She passed out. Her 11-year-old son was killed by the carbon monoxide poisoning. This was not the first incident in this hotel room. An elderly couple was subject to poisoning in the same room 2 months earlier. The investigation reported there was a faulty pool heater which was allowing carbon monoxide to enter the room through a corroded pipe. Incidents like this are common, whether at a hotel, home, cabin, or even boat. We must recognize the signs and symptoms early and exit the environment immediately. As stated earlier, children and elderly are more susceptible to carbon monoxide poisoning. Pets too. The reason young children are more susceptible is because they breathe at a higher rate than adults and older children. This increases the amount of inhaled carbon monoxide. Elders are more susceptible due to their weakened immune systems and any underlying conditions and illnesses. Pets are more susceptible because of their size. First and foremost, CO detectors are essential to prevention of carbon monoxide poisoning. We recommend one near every bedroom, one on every floor of your home. If an alarm is sounding, do not ignore it. Install a battery-operated or battery backup CO detector in your home and check or replace the battery when you change the time on your clocks each spring and fall for daylight savings. Place your detector where it will wake you up if it alarms, such as outside your bedroom. Consider buying a detector with a digital readout. This detector can tell you the highest level of CO concentration in your home in addition to alarming. Replace your CO detector within 10 years, preferably sooner. Check the recommended time with the manufacturer on the detector. Every year, especially when not used for months and then turn on, have your heating system, water heater, and any other gas, oil, or coal burning appliance serviced by a quality technician. Have your chimney checked or cleaned every year. Chimneys can block debris. This can cause CO to build up inside your home or cabin. Make sure your gas appliances are vented properly. Horizontal vent pipes for appliances such as water heater should go up slightly as they go toward outdoors. This prevents CO from leaking if the joints or pipes aren't filled tightly. Never patch or vent pipe with tape, gum, or something else. This kind of patch can make CO buildup in your home, cabin, or camper. Never use a gas range or oven for heating. Using a gas range or oven for heating can cause a buildup of CO inside your home, cabin, or camper. Never use any gas-powered engine indoors, including generators, which would be at least 15 feet from any window or door. Do not idle cars, lawnmowers, etc. in your garage, even with the door open. There is risk for carbon monoxide poisoning. Buying an alarm should not be based on price. These are not something to skimp on. Purchase only ones with the Underwriter Laboratories UL 2034 label. Make sure to follow the manufacturer's instructions. The fire department is starting a program to deliver and install smoke detectors and CO alarms in residents in the city. We will have more information on this later. But all you will need to do is call and set up an appointment. We will come out and install the alarm and give you a brief school on how it works and information on risk reduction. Prevention starts with individuals. Many of the 20,000 annual hospital visits related to carbon monoxide poisoning can be alleviated from homes being properly prepared. How does one prepare for a carbon monoxide poisoning incident? What is preparation or preparedness? How does it differ from prevention? Phillips, Neal, and Webb define preparedness as activities undertaken prior to the onset of a disaster to enhance the response capacities of individuals and households. They further explain this is the ability of social units to accurately assess a hazard, realistically anticipate likely problems in the event of an actual disaster, and appropriately take precautionary measures to reduce impacts and ensure an efficient and effective response. Although carbon monoxide may not be a formal definition of a disaster, it is a high risk in our community. Household preparedness could save your family in carbon monoxide poisoning events. There are several ways to be prepared for a CO poisoning. Information or knowledge of the topic is imperative to preparing for an incident. Knowing what causes carbon monoxide ensures the proper use and installation of these products, which can cause poisonings. When we know the signs and symptoms of carbon monoxide, we are able to make the distinction that there is a problem beyond feeling ill, and we may need to exit the environment. How do we receive this knowledge? This lecture is a start. You will be able to obtain information and ask questions at a risk reduction lecture. Another way to prepare your family for a potential carbon monoxide poisoning is learning first aid and CPR. The skills learned in these classes could save a life and will aid us and other first responders in reducing the time without first aid prior to the emergency room or hospital. Finally, just like we asked during fire safety classes, set up an emergency plan for carbon monoxide with your family and make sure everyone knows what to do. If you have some of the higher risk populations in your household, be sure to have a plan that will include their needs. The preparation you put in place will help the rest of the emergency response mitigate potential death. Response is the activities we, not just fire and first responders, but emergency departments, hospitals, and households do to provide emergency assistance for casualties of carbon monoxide poisonings. It is also how we seek to reduce the probability of secondary effects. As previously mentioned, there are different levels of carbon monoxide poisoning, and in certain cases, rapid response is critical to the survival of the person poisoned. Some cases may be minor enough to just exit the environment, and in others, oxygen therapy and CPR may be needed, as well as further medical care in the hospital. Pre-hospital care is essential to the recovery of carbon monoxide poisoning victims. Pre-hospital care is separated from first responder care in this lecture. Pre-hospital care is what you, as a family member or neighbor, can do for someone affected by CO poisoning. Our role as first responders builds off what you as an informed, trained layperson has done. We will take the steps needed to care for the victim, including investigation of the source and transport to the emergency room. At the emergency room, tests and interventions will be done to determine if any further action is required. Action like using the hyperbaric chamber to expel the carbon monoxide from hemoglobin. Final resource to use is poison control. If you are unsure if this is an emergency and other variables are in place, call poison control if you think 911 is not needed. We suggest calling 911 to be safe, but at minimum, call poison control and exit the environment. We have discussed briefly actions to take in the event of a carbon monoxide poisoning incident. If, after the preventative measures, you find yourself faced with the CO poisoning in your home or community, the preparedness plans you have will help you with providing the pre-hospital care the victim will need. The obvious step is to remove any affected individuals from the environment. This will ensure there is no further effects of the poisoning. Remember, it could be minor enough that fresh air may be all that is needed. Either way, if it is minor or not, call 911. If there is a carbon monoxide situation in the house, it needs to be determined and handled properly. The fire department and gas company have the proper equipment to handle the problem. And if it is a high enough risk concentration, fire personnel have their SCBAs to enter their atmosphere. Once out of the environment, do not re-enter. The levels can vary in different areas of the environment. One room may be at 50 parts per million, while another may be high enough to cause severe problems. The fire department and other first responders, ambulance, will also have proper medical equipment to aid in pre-hospital care. Oxygen therapy, for example. If transport to the hospital is necessary, they will provide it or recommend someone to drive the victim if not a severe case. As first responders, fire personnel have multiple roles in a carbon monoxide poisoning event. We also work with other agencies to ensure life safety and safe environments. Ambulances and medics help give emergency medical services, including transport if needed. They are also there for fire personnel in the event of a catastrophe. Several fire trucks may arrive on a scene. This is the case because one will be needed to provide emergency medical services to victims, one will be needed to search for more potential victims, and one will be needed to locate the source of the carbon monoxide. This is only in severe cases. In most smaller carbon monoxide incidents, only 1 or 2 trucks may show up. As mentioned, fire personnel are there to rescue anyone who is not able to exit the environment. If this is the case, fire personnel will don their PPE or personal protective equipment, including SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus. Fire personnel will not enter a part per million higher than 50 without their SCBA. This is OSHA recommended. This is not only for those searching and rescuing victims, but for those who are locating the source of the problem. A tool fire personnel carry to help locate the source is a 4-gas monitor. There are many variations of 4-gas monitors, and each has certain functions, but all will detect carbon monoxide in the atmosphere. One reaction for those whose CO detector alarm is to open windows and doors. This is an acceptable reaction. However, fire personnel will close all doors and windows to pinpoint the location of the source. Firefighters will check near all appliances which produce carbon monoxide for possible leaks or pilot lights being out. A pilot light which is out may give a reading of 15 to 20 parts per million. This may be the cause of some CO alarms. Firefighters will notify the gas company of their findings. In some cases, the gas company will not be needed, and the fire personnel will recommend or mitigate the problem themselves. If the gas company is needed, fire personnel will aid the gas company where required. Once the source is located and shut off or fixed, ventilation will occur to relieve the house from the toxic gas. Once deemed safe, it will be okay for families to enter their homes. Once transported to the emergency room, care is handed off from the paramedics to the ER staff. Nurses and doctors get all the information available from paramedics. This ensures proper care. Many of the prior pre-hospital steps will continue. The victim of carbon monoxide poisoning will continually be monitored. If conditions get better, the patient will be released once levels of carbon monoxide in the hemoglobin, red blood cells, are at normal. Recall, there is a 1 to 2 part per million of CO in our tissues normally. Medscape explains oxygen therapy will continue at 100% until the hemoglobin carbon monoxide level reaches less than 10%. Pulse oximeters give the oxygen saturation in hemoglobin. I stated earlier, carbon monoxide attached to the hemoglobin give false readings on a pulse oximeter. Pre-hospital reading may show 100% oxygen, but if symptoms are present and CO poisoning is possible, hospitalization is necessary. Emergency departments have the tools needed to get a proper reading of hemoglobin. They will be able to differentiate between oxygen and carbon monoxide. ER staff will calculate the necessary duration of therapy based on the half-life of carbon monoxide. This will determine the length of stay in the ER, and if extreme measures are needed. According to Medscape, ERs should consider immediate transfer of patients with levels of 40% carbon monoxide in hemoglobin or cardiovascular or neurologic impairment to a hyperbaric facility, if feasible. Persistent impairment after 4 hours of normal baric oxygen therapy necessitates transfer to a hyperbaric center. Normal baric therapy is oxygen administered at 1 atmosphere, while hyperbaric is oxygen therapy at pressures greater than 1 atmosphere. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, according to Medscape, is breathing 100% oxygen while under increased atmospheric pressure. It can be traced back as far as the 1600s. One downside of hyperbaric therapy in the U.S. is there are not an adequate amount of facilities across the nation. There are only 361 chambers, and only 43 are equipped enough for patients needing lots of care. There are 2 types of hyperbaric chambers, one for a single patient and one for multiple patients at the same time. This type is pictured here. 100% oxygen therapy in a hyperbaric chamber saturates the hemoglobin with oxygen, decreasing the carbon monoxide attached to it. Other than 911, which is recommended in a carbon monoxide emergency, poison control can be an asset. Here is the number, as well as the website for Minnesota Poison Control. The number is easy to remember. Poison control allows access to health care advice for both the lay public and the healthcare providers. Poison control is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week helpline which is free to use. Everything is confidential. This presentation has given you a lot of information on carbon monoxide, what it is, who is at risk, and common sources of carbon monoxide in households. There was a lot of information in this presentation, but some key takeaways are knowing the signs and symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning, knowing the potential causes, how to prevent carbon monoxide poisoning, preparing for an emergency, and responding to a family member or friend who has been poisoned by carbon monoxide. As you can see, we need this and other types of community risk reduction classes to inform our community as well as prevent, prepare, respond, and mitigate potential risks in our community. Again, I am Michael Graves, Minneapolis firefighter, can be reached at the stations. At this time, we will take any questions.